Okay, so I know I've made a number of videos about this particular topic, and I'm going to go ahead and make one more because this does seem like the relevant time to do so. As of the time of this recording, we are a number of hours away from the release of Tides of Torment. Now, I actually, CA does not like me enough to give me early access. Okay, I'm actually a small channel. The more likely thing is they've never heard of me before. But in any case, so I don't have early access to the DLC before it comes out. And so, like so many other people, I am somewhat beholden to listen to the feedback from other people. And thankfully, there are a number of excellent YouTubers who cover Warhammer 3, so I don't really have much to add to that anyway. But in any case, I tend to not really watch a whole lot in the days or weeks leading up to the DLC. I kind of like to make up my own mind. But for whatever reason, in the last day or so, I guess once the embargo was lifted and I saw people putting out their honest reviews, I thought, well, let's go ahead and hear what these people have to say and kind of get a sense for how high to make my expectations going into the Tides of Torment. Now, I'm going to preface all this by saying, as I have said many times before, and I need to give a disclaimer here because I am not saying I hope they never do any more DLCs. What I am saying and have said before is I would prefer that they not do any more DLCs if it were a choice between doing DLCs and fixing the existing problems in the game. In other words, I consider the higher priority between adding more lords and more units and things like that to this game. The higher priority is fix the existing bugs in the game, guys. I mean, come on. It is extremely disheartening to see some really glaring bugs in the game that have continued on now for years without getting addressed. In a couple of cases, we've been told that they're working on them. In other cases, we've never heard peep out of them. Anyway, that's the overall preface here to everything that I'm about to say, which is when it comes to Tides of Torment, I'm looking forward to the introduction of the new legendary lords. I'm looking forward to, seeing some mechanical reworks. I really hope that I like Norska after this because I like Norska as a faction, and I've just avoided playing them almost entirely because they're kind of a broken meh faction in recent times. Anyway, all that being said, I'm looking forward to what's coming in Tides of Torment, don't get me wrong, but for heaven's sake, don't make any existing problems worse and don't introduce any new problems. That's really my goal coming into to this DLC. And so I've heard a little bit of mixed reviews when it comes to Tides of Torment. I'm just going to pick one of them here because this is Blake's takes. I will, of course, link to this video in the description of my video so that you can check it out for yourself so you can see his full review. I think he gives a good sort of mixed review. There are things he likes about it, there are things he doesn't like about it, things he criticizes about it. I think the things that he criticizes about it are fair, but again, I don't want to bash on the game. I've seen other reviews that I think are more positive than this one, so I'm not suggesting that I'm all doom and gloom here. But there's one particular part of this video that I did want to talk about. I don't normally like doing reaction videos, but I think this is really kind of in my wheelhouse because I have made other videos about these exact things. So I'm going to go ahead and play this up for you all and then add my commentary.
One thing that I'm certain isn't linked to bias is the bugs. There are heaps of the bugs in the builds that we were given. Again, it was in active development, so a good chance that certain things will get patched, but long-standing issues are still not addressed. Cathay maps being poorly optimized, the gate bug killing this exalted keeper of secrets, the AI bizarrely marching forwards at my positions, almost like they're trying to walk around and through me. I've noticed the fire at will bug seems to be more prevalent. I've seen more of the AI just walking through your infantry formations to start attacking your backline. Units disobeying orders, like cavalry managing to successfully disengage for you to notice that they're being slaughtered because one model was trapped, so the rest of the unit kamikazes back in.
Okay, I'm going to pause right there because that's obviously a big one. Some of those that he's talked about right there are ones that I have done videos on and have certainly mentioned a lot of times in my Let's Plays, for example. But that last one there, that is such a huge one. I just kind of categorize all of these different problems that fall into the category of your units ignoring the player's orders. It's incredibly frustrating. CA, please don't make this problem worse. What I'm kind of hoping is that it just was kind of coincidence that it seemed worse to him in his playthrough, rather than the problem actually getting worse. But yeah, anyway, I've talked about this. It's extremely frustrating to have to micromanage your units, and then on top of that to have to to see them, even when you're trying to micromanage them, to see them start to follow your order, but then one of their models bumped into one of the enemy units, and then the entire unit of yours decides to completely, at this point, disregard your orders and turn around and go back straight into combat that you're trying to pull them away from. Yeah, so anyway, but let's go on because there's more.
This isn't the BBW, and I promise I will get around to making another one of those, so I won't list everything I ran into, but yeah, it's still the same old buggy Warhammer 3. A big issue which I found so frustrating through my playthrough was chasing down routing units. It's a big part of the game, trying to cripple your enemies as much as possible so your next fight isn't so costly. It's a massive part of Slaaneish's playstyle, because that's how you charge your army abilities. But the unit interactions are all over the place. I watched my cursed Etin Runecaller slowly push the enemy lord off the battlefield to safety. I watched Dekala start circling around the unit she's meant to be chasing, so I'd have to manually intervene and straighten her up to charge properly. I even saw this same behaviour with a war mammoth. Pathfinding for chasing routing units is just awful, and honestly, I cannot believe it's still this shit.
Okay. Yeah. So I've made videos about this as well. In fact, I called this the #1 problem in the game. And if it has gotten worse, I don't really know what I'm going to do, to be honest with you, because when you fight all the battles manually like I do, and you end up, any enjoyment you get out of fighting battles is almost eradicated by the incredibly frustrating experience of trying to run down units when the battle is over. I've had so many battles where the amount of time that I spend fighting the battle is less than the amount of time I spend trying to run down fleeing enemy units, and in particular, fleeing enemy lords. But based on the examples that he showed here, I'm just hoping that these are the most extreme examples that are not indicative of normal behavior. But anyway, oh my goodness, this got me very, very concerned. But let's go on.
With a Runecaller example, that was the first battle I'd fought on the new DLC. When I've flanked a formation and broken a unit, I've seen all of my units sort of devolve into a blob where nobody is doing anything, and you have to manually pull apart the units so then you can actually chase and kill things instead of trying to merge with them. It's things like this which just drive me bonkers with this game. We're 3 years in and shit like this still happens regularly. Things like this shouldn't be happening and it needs to improve, but after so long, clearly there's no apparent fix for it. No fix for your units pushing the enemies off the map. It's just ridiculous that I have to even dedicate a portion of this review to it. How are these ridiculous looking unit interactions not picked up? Why is chasing down routing units such a massive pain in the arse in Total War Warhammer 3 when it actually was okay in games like Medieval 2? I'm not sure. Maybe they can look to bring in Medieval 2's system where it just touches people and you capture them. I think I prefer that than them actually try to land blows on routing units and just not being able to touch them. It's all very strange.
Okay, yeah, I actually just want to echo what he's saying right there. I hadn't thought about that before, but yeah, just do that. For the love of all that is holy, please, please fix chasing down fleeing enemy units. If it's because the animations are broken where you just cannot land an attack, and that sure seems to me like that's the problem, you know, I don't know, get rid of the animations. If all you're doing is fleeing, just have it so that as soon as they get close enough, or as soon as they touch, as soon as they bump into another unit, that unit is considered dead or captured or whatever. But it can't, if what we're seeing here, what he's talking about here, is indicative of what it's going to be like, that's just absolutely not acceptable.
Anyway, over the past few weeks, I've been playing a few other games. I played The Outer Worlds 2.
Okay, I think that's probably enough to go ahead and talk about. I just want to make one final point here on this. I am still looking forward to this DLC. I do intend to play all of the new Legendary Lords, and I'm sure that there is going to be, as always, a mix of good stuff and bad stuff. But the one thing that I want to stress is what makes Warhammer 3 Total War, in fact, what makes all Total War games so outstanding. You know, why are they the dominant game in this particular genre? It's because of the combination of strategy and tactics in a way that no other game has been able to replicate. There's games that have tried to do both, but there's no other series of games that have been able to do what the Total War series has been able to do now for multiple decades. But that formula only works if battles are fun, if battles are working. And I get it. There's tons and tons of calculations that are going on. It's extremely complicated. I realize that. The animations, as you know, as the graphics get better, as animations get better, there's going to be fluky little things that happen, like what we see, where it's still not quite perfect, right? You know, timing and everything else is still not quite perfect. But Creative Assembly has got to understand that the way it is right now is not acceptable, that there are just aspects of fighting battles that just make fighting battles not worth it. You can't end up, being the best game in the genre, or at least the claim to being the best game in the genre in terms of combining great strategy with great tactics, if your tactics are fundamentally broken like they are right now. So fingers crossed that these are problems that are either not really as bad as they appear here, that they are not truly any worse with this DLC than they were pre-DLC, or alternatively, if they are, that they are now the number one priority going in, and as soon as CA is able to, they will release a patch that addresses them. I'm extremely frustrated with the support philosophy of Creative Assembly. They do release patches. They, when you read through the patches, they're trying to, they're trying to bring tons of fanfare to things that really seem like quite simple changes, or things that should have never been problems to begin with. And then meanwhile, at the same time, they're neglecting things that are really, really critically important. There is, I guess the last point I'm going to make is there's no bigger fan of Total War than me. I really, really have loved these games for a very long time. I absolutely want them to succeed. I'm looking forward to future titles. I am not bashing the game. I've made videos talking about how much fun there still is in the game, and I think we lose the forest for the trees when we get bogged down by all these problems and don't see all the good that's in the game. As long as I continue to have lots of fun in the game, I'm going to continue to play it. But you just have to call a spade, and these problems are not acceptable. And even I am going to get to the point where it's just not worth it to keep going. So anyway, I'm really, really hopeful that that the future is still fairly bright for this game. I've made a video where I said it's never going to be, we all have to acknowledge it's never going to be the game that we wish it could be. It's never going to reach its potential. I've accepted that. But I still have an expectation that it's not going to get worse in terms of its playability and its bugginess. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Coming into this DLC, I just I guess maybe I just needed to vent a little bit. I welcome the feedback. Let me know, if I'm going in one direction or the other, a little bit too much, because I try to be balanced in my discussion of this game. I'm actually okay that CA doesn't give me any early access, because I do kind of think that makes me free to just, speak my mind when it comes to this game. And there's an awful lot of good that I acknowledge, but there are things that I think need to be criticized as well. All right. Anyway, I know that was a long ramble. Talk me down from the ledge if you feel like that is necessary. But anyway, love you guys. See y'all in the next video.